Hi there. Good morning. I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss American Trading. And if you didn't know it already, you are tuned into our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash. I have with me today my co-host, Chris Agelastos. Chris, thanks for joining us today. We're excited to be talking about one of the topics that we haven't really been able to let me rephrase that. We haven't discussed as much this year as we're drawing near to the end of 2024. As much as we thought we would be. And what I mean by that, by the way, how are you today? Start with that.
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. Sorry, maybe the caffeine is kicking in or something. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So we started off, was it 2023, with the Silicon Valley bank closure? Yep. Pretty major deal. It was definitely something that, as it happened, I think a lot of people were double clutching, saying, "Oh my gosh, I hope this isn't like the beginning of the end of what we've been hearing about with banking." Yeah. And there were a few more closures. There were some rough spots in 2023. In 2024, things have been relatively calm until recently. Yeah. And what I'm referring to is, we had a recent closure, and we'll get into this here, out of Oklahoma. And a bank was abruptly shut down by U.S. regulators in the second bank failure of 2024. Now, to be fair, in the grand scheme of things, this bank, I think in total assets had a little over 100 million.
Yeah.
Point being is, it's a lot of money to me, and perhaps you as well, Chris.
Me as well. Yeah.
I don't know about those tuning in, but in the banking world, that's nothing really much at all. Especially, you look at Silicon Valley, some of these other big banks that have gone through these things. 100 million is not a big deal. However, what is a big deal, in my opinion, anyways, as you get into this article and start looking at, what happened. Is you have them actually turning this situation. Now, let me back up a moment here. When we see bank closures, we've been accustomed to seeing and hearing things like their balance sheets were off. The debts to assets were out of balance. All these various things that are to be expected in a rough or bumpy economy like we're in. But in this case, the regulators that came in are citing that there were false and deceptive bank records and other information that would suggest that there was fraud that depleted this bank's capital. And that speaks to, a bigger problem. That's not just a bank falling victim to the economy as a whole. That's a bank which seems to be coming a bit more commonplace than I think any of us want to hear. But this is a bank that, is guilty of committing fraud and crimes and things of that nature. And at the end of the day, here's the thing. As you read this, and as I said a moment ago, Chris, it's $100 million, small bank in the grand scheme of our banking system. But I don't believe for 1 second that this is a mutually exclusive situation or scenario with this bank, meaning that there are other banks that are likely out there doing the same thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was my big concern too when I saw this is, so all the reports that we get that the banks are fine and that regulators are, keeping an eye on them and making sure that they have enough reserves. I mean, this just shows right there that, that isn't always going to be the case. So, what percentage of banks, falsify their records? I'm sure it's relatively speaking a smaller percentage, right? I'm sure, most of them, let's hope, are doing things the right way, but it's got to make you wonder, how safe is the system really? How unsound are a lot of these banks, especially smaller regional banks like this. And yeah, this isn't, First National Bank of Lindsay in Oklahoma. Not a ton of people are going to be affected by this, but the people that are affected by it, it's a big deal to them. And this is Middle America, right? This isn't some bank in Manhattan. These are a lot of working class folks that, maybe work in agriculture and have amassed some money. And at least $7 million of those deposits we know are uninsured. So,
Right.
now again, in the grand scheme of things in the United States, is that a big deal? No. But to those people who may have completely lost that $7 million, which, is about 7 or 8% of their deposits,
Sure.
so it's definitely a big problem. And there was another bank earlier this year, Republic Bank in Philadelphia, that had similar problems, had inadequate reserves, and that's really what happened here too. That it was because of fraud that they had depleted their capital, and they didn't have enough reserves, and they were just falsifying those bank records to hope and skate by. I imagine they probably got into trouble and thought maybe we can fix this, so let's lie about things until we can get the numbers right, and then lo and behold, they weren't able to and got caught.
Well, and that's, I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, Chris, and something we haven't talked about, I didn't prepare you for, but keep in mind, and for those of you tuning in, if you look at go through our podcast, I think it was just 3-4 podcasts ago, where we were talking about TD Bank. Now, you look at what's happening here with this bank in Oklahoma. TD Bank was found guilty of money laundering.
Yeah.
I mean, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And they were fined several $billion, which I don't know how the math shakes out on that. But to my point earlier, where, as you read this, and this is, again, a small bank, $100 million in again, the grand scheme of things. And I don't even know if I need to ask this question, but how does TD, who is guilty of money laundering, how do they get a $3 billion slap on the wrist? And I say slap on the wrist because of the size and magnitude of their bank.
Yeah.
But we talked about this in that podcast. No pursuit by the authorities. Nothing that we've read or that we've heard of. They're
Right.
not to indict anybody.
Nobody being locked up. Yeah.
Correct. And then yet you've got this bank who I don't know which is worse. At least in this case, it's not like some of these other situations we've heard with banks where they were ripping off their customers, albeit, there's this $7 million shortfall. But that's what speaks to that, what's kind of screwed up in our banking system. This stuff is happening, and this is what we're hearing about. And I don't think for one moment that there's not more of this going on out there.
Yeah.
But did I say A or one? But either way, B or two, whichever one I'm left with. The bottom line is that just the disparity of justice that exists out there, where, again, you've got one that's getting fined and others that are being turned into the authorities. And, what's the difference? And it just speaks to the fact that it seems like our whole system, in my opinion, is just reeling out of control right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just the banking system either, really. I mean, I know we don't get into like pharmaceutical companies and such much, but an independent nutritional supplement company that maybe says something wrong on a label or in an advertisement gets shut down, and a pharmaceutical company that causes a lot of deaths gets fined, a few $1 billion and gets to continue to move on. So it is, it's definitely not a level playing field, and the big boys with the money can usually skate by a little bit, and it's not right, it's not fair, but it does seem to be the way things are.
Well, and for all of us who live in the real world and we make our money, we put our money in the bank. So when we have to, pay bills or whatever, we want it to be there. You want to say, what do we do? These small banks are certainly not probably on the radar as much as these larger banks. However, these larger banks are doing things equally as corrupt. And, I guess is the moral of the story here, Chris, if you want to keep your money safe, just go in a big bank because they may get fined, but they're not going to get in big trouble.
I mean, to some extent, I do bank with one of the big, the top five, partially for that reason. I kind of think maybe they'll be too big to fail. So when they get caught in something, hopefully they will get a bailout, or at least I in turn can get a bailout. But yeah, it's again, it's not right, but it does seem to be par for the course, as they say.
Well, part of your bailout is your gold and silver, but that's a discussion.
Right, right, right.
All right. Well, still in banking news, let's see, another article here that, it speaks to, as all this is going on behind the scenes with the banks and everything else out there, the headline here, forgive my stuttering, the big banks are bracing for losses as Americans struggle to pay off debt. And this is not a surprise or shocker article by any stretch of the imagination. But again, when you have, and the reason I wanted to kind of incorporate this article with the first article we talked about, and it kind of speaks to everything that's going on in our financial markets and our economy today. Everything is interconnected. Everything is related. So you have these banks who we know of at least two instances we've talked about in this podcast that have been participating in fraudulent schemes. So that creates a set of problems. But then you also have the banks I don't want to ruin your day, Chris, but they're saying big banks, which that's one of yours. How big banks are bracing for these losses as Americans do struggle to pay off the debt. Their debt, excuse me, and they break it down into, where the problem areas are with, the various loan delinquencies in terms of credit cards, autos, and commercial real estate, which that's no shock. And, Wall Street is prepared and bracing for this. How severe do you think this problem is, Chris? Do you think this is something that the banking industry is going to be able to weather through? Or at any point, do you think there's going to be that proverbial straw that breaks the banking camel's back?
Yeah, I think it will happen. Hopefully it won't be widespread. But again, if it happens to one of the bigger banks, that has 15 or 20% of the nation's deposits, it's going to be a huge problem, even if it is contained, let's say, to one of the larger banks. And at the end of the day, you have, like you mentioned, you have the banks that are doing things the wrong way and committing fraud. You have to worry about them. And now maybe the banks that are still doing things, quote unquote, the right way, could have trouble from not being able to collect these debts. And, higher prices don't seem to be coming down anytime soon. Interest rates have come down a little bit in some areas, but it actually hasn't had a major effect in a positive way on the consumer. Consumers are still feeling the pain of higher prices. People are continuing to dip into credit and live on credit, and now are paying higher interest rates to do so. So there's going to be more delinquencies. They specify in here too, auto loans. We've seen major increases in car prices over the last 5 years. And in turn, now many of these people that have had to borrow to cover that increase in vehicle inflation are now upside down in their car loans. So they're paying higher interest rates. They're upside down on the loan. Any moves with unemployment here are going to cause people to not be able to pay their bills and more loan failures, and that's going to affect the banks. And then add to that the commercial real estate problems that continue to happen as loans become due and companies have to refinance these big empty buildings or mostly empty buildings for higher interest rates. Any moves in the economy are going to continue to affect the banking system, the lending industry negatively. So it's definitely something to be aware of and protect yourself as much as you can. I would definitely say don't keep any funds in there over the FDIC insurance limit. Spread your money out amongst multiple banks, diversify into precious metals, real estate, tangibles, and don't keep all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, what's really kind of disheartening about this whole topic, at the end of the day, and we've discussed this many times, that there are households or families in this country that are hurting, like desperately. And not to be political about it, but the current administration is not even addressing these issues whatsoever. I mean, you listen to the talking heads on Wall Street. All they want to talk about is how, inflation is in check, how the markets are good, how, things are in the recovery. We missed the recession, all this
Yeah.
positive. And then yet you've got people out there that hardworking Americans who, have been tax-paying citizens for their entire life that are, having difficulty making ends meet. You don't see the government coming out and addressing what's going on with the banking industry. You don't see them coming
Right.
out and talking about what's going on with debt or what they can do to, kind of help that. Other than, I guess, the big thing is the forgiving the college debt, which, that is great, and I guess in a way, but obviously somebody's paying for that. But just this overall lack of acknowledgement of what's happening, and the problem I see with that is with the lack of acknowledgement of it's happening. How do you present solutions to maybe help rectify or correct the situation? So,
Right.
thus the secret war on cash, ladies and gentlemen. If you have not called in to receive your complimentary or free copy of our report entitled "The Secret War on Cash," please do so. You can reach us via telephone, 1-800-289-2646, or you can visit us online at www.swissamerica.com. I can't encourage you enough to do so. We also have information that will talk better or more about diversification. We have an exciting introductory offer for those who want to get into silver with our Walking Liberty Half offer. So a lot of things for you to call in, and the time to do so couldn't be better. Again, if you haven't called us, please do so. And if you are not subscribed to this podcast, we really hope you do so we can talk to you more in the future about this and other exciting things. Chris, thank you so much. And for those of you tuning in, have a great rest of your day. Talk to you again soon.